It's 8 o'clock, so welcome. I have a couple things I want to say before we go to our two presentations. I think David Schwartz is supposed to go first, but just a couple things. I sent out a sheet with the halachic concepts that you would have gotten in the group, and when I think that it's important for us, because we learned so many halachot and so many rules and laws and things, it's very hard to remember all the details that we studied, although you can always refer back to the notes. However, the concepts, I think, is really the most important thing, because these concepts are going to come about over and over and over again as we go through all areas of halakha. So like things like when there's a doubt on a rabbinic, for something that's of rabbinic origin, we are lenient. That's Svekad Rabbanan Lakula. Those are basic concepts. So when I do a test, which was part of the mission, it's going to be on those concepts rather than, so if you can just study and review those concepts, that would be great. So just to keep things moving along, I am going to hand over the floor to David. Fire away. I think you're muted still. I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my apologies. So here goes. You're in a situation where you only have non-kosher food to sustain your body. Should you make a bracha before eating it, and by corollary, also one after eating it? The question is gleaned from the third scenario presented by Rab Shul, which went: the soldiers in Iraq asked her unit for kosher MREs, but the request got lost and the kosher food didn't arrive. She received food for the mission to the desert to last 3 days and is now on a small guard post watching a suspected Al-Qaeda cell. She radios into her rabbi: "The only food I have is not kosher. I need to eat it, but do I say a bracha?" If you were her rabbi, how would you advise her? Remarkably, this question was posed by Rab Shul while I was wrestling with the same problem as a patient in the hospital trying to get a hold of kosher food to eat. I want to thank my wife and daughter for bringing me kosher food, so I didn't have to rely on the answer. I thank Rabbi Tzvi Tachman for having taught me several years ago. For us to get the answer and to understand it requires we dive into language, texts, concepts, devarim, and shorashim, roots. Here are the questions we're going to tackle. What is a bracha? What purpose does it serve? What does the word kosher mean? What are we, and what is our purpose as a people and as Jews? First question, what's a bracha? What purpose does it serve? Just as a reminder, the rabbis defined a bracha as a foundational and formulaic statement of theology that must contain 4 elements. Baruch, blessed, Atah Adoshem, are you Lord, Elokeinu, God, Melech HaOlam, King of the world. As noted in Sefer HaChinuch, the purpose of the bracha is to affirmatively and audibly acknowledge God as Baruch, the source of all blessing. In reciting the general bracha before eating food that does not grow from the ground, we say, Shehakol ne'yeh b'davaro, for everything exists by your word. In so doing, we recognize God as the creator of all, i.e., God is the source of all blessing. He spoke the world into being. And as Josie reminded us last week, this can also serve to remind us to be thankful and grateful. Recognizing this, the rabbis in Brachos state that to derive benefit from something without saying a bracha is like stealing. Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught, Asor lo la'adam, it is forbidden for one to derive benefit, ha'olam hazeh, from this world, which is the property of God, below bracha, without reciting a bracha beforehand. And anyone who derives benefit from this world without a blessing, it is as if he is guilty of ma'al, misuse or trespass of a consecrated object. So even though the obligation to make a bracha before eating is not d'oraita of the Torah, we are obligated, we are chiyuv, to say a bracha. But the rabbis thought it so important that we make this acknowledgement and recite a bracha before benefiting from something that they elevated the recitation of the bracha to one of the 7 rabbinic mitzvot. That is, they elevated from a rabbinic decree, a gezerah, to a commandment, a mitzvah. So it seems obvious then that when we're about to consume food, physical sustenance, regardless of whether it's kosher or not, we should recite a blessing acknowledging that the food we're about to consume ultimately comes from God, right? Not so fast. There's a mechlochet, a disagreement, but an aphorism I coined while writing this devar sums up the practical Jewish law known as halacha lemaaseh. Nish kosher, zog nishta bracha. Not kosher? Don't say a bracha. This may seem very counterintuitive based on what we just discussed, no? Well, let's go to the next 2 questions to help explain. What does the word kosher mean? I'm not talking about what food is considered kosher. I'm asking, what does the word itself mean? As a reminder, it's not just food that's kosher. We have kosher tefillin, kosher seferim Torah, kosher mezuzos, etc. Kosher literally means fit for a purpose. Something that is kosher is something that is permitted for a purpose. It is mutar under Jewish law. And something that is not kosher is prohibited or forbidden. It is asur under Jewish law. Rambam in his Mishnah Torah Sefer Ahava, Halacha 119, addressed the question about whether to say a blessing before and after partaking of non-kosher items, the question that's in front of us. He wrote, Kol ha'ochel, dever ha'asur, all food that is forbidden, whether eaten consciously or inadvertently b'shagega, he should not bless, not at the beginning, nor at the end, v'lo basuf. And the Shulchan Aruch, or Echaim, Simon 196 Aleph, also addresses the same question, blessings before and after. Ochel dever isur, if one ate a forbidden item, forbidden even if just by rabbinic decree. There can be no zimun, invitation to Birkas Hamazon, which hopefully Rav Shul will talk to us about tonight, on it, nor a blessing on it, neither before, v'lo basof, nor after it. It then goes on in the next verse to provide a qualification, that when one is in a place of danger, they are allowed to bless even forbidden food. B'makom sechana, in a place of danger, he can bless on it. So let's now look at the underlying words of mutar, permitted, and asur, forbidden. The word mutar means unbound or free, as derived from the verb natar, which means to sever or loosen. Well, asur means bound up or imprisoned. So the question becomes, what is it that's freed in kosher food or imprisoned in non-kosher food? Let's move on to the last question to unpack this. What are we and what is our purpose? We are more than corporeal beings. We are also spiritual beings. Our tradition teaches that these parts of our existence are not separate, but are part of our integrated whole. As we say in a Mishaberach, when wishing someone a healing, we ask God for refuach hanefesh, a healing of spirit, or refuas haguf, and a healing of body. This reminds us that our corporeal body, our guf, enables us to fulfill our purpose, but it needs physical sustenance. Further, the ability to fulfill our purpose is not through our body alone. It also requires our soul, our nefesh, our spiritual essence, and it too needs sustenance. Well, the general rule is if the food's not kosher, don't say a bracha. The soldier in an operational theater, i.e. a place of danger, may be allowed as a special circumstance to recite a bracha because they are obligated to keep themselves alive. They must do so to fulfill their and our purpose to be Kiddush Hashem and acknowledge God so that he may bless us. This is also implicit in our recitation of each bracha itself. And we remind ourselves of this each morning when reciting Psalm 30. What is to be gained from my death? Can dust praise you? Can it declare your faithfulness? So perhaps now we can understand that kosher food, food that is permitted and unbound, also allows sparks of holiness within the food to feed not just our corporeal selves, but also our spiritual selves. While non-kosher food may keep us alive, it's not full sustenance. Kosher food feeds our whole being to allow us to fulfill our purpose. And that is why the general rule is that the bracha is reserved for kosher food.
Very good. Thank you very much. I'm still on sound. Thank you. I like the way you added a spiritual dimension to this. I'm just going to add one thing that of the later poskim, most of them follow the lead of the Shulchan Aruch, who said that if you have to eat it because it's a danger, then you do make a blessing before and after. But and one of the reasons given, and this is quoted by the Mishnah Berurah, is because sustaining yourself in face of danger with a non-kosher food, you're doing a mitzvah, because the Torah says v'chai b'hem, you should live by the rules of the Torah, and it's a mitzvah to sustain yourself, even though the food is not kosher. But that's really good. Thank you very much. And afterwards, I'll share with everyone his source sheet so you can see the notes, David's notes. The second question will go to Aryeh Leib, so I'll hand it over to you and fire away.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question?
Oh yeah, please go ahead.
You differentiate between, because especially in modernity, between kosher and hechshered, because there are products that could be in theory kosher, like a fish, but it's not necessarily labeled according to the way we understand hechshers in America or wherever you are.
Well, for the purpose of today, because one day we'll get to Hilchot Kashrut and we'll go into the nitty-gritty details of the kosher rules. But for the purpose of today, anything that's permitted to eat under normal circumstances. I know there's a wide range of what some people might eat and some people might not, and we'll get to those details when we do the laws of kashrut. But for the purpose of today, I left it much more vague. Kosher being something that is permissible, non-kosher being something that's not permissible, unless, of course, there's a state of danger like our case. Anything else before we go to the next one? If not, oh yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I actually had a question as I was doing this, which is going back to the general principles that you note, specifically the two in terms of leniency for rabbinic gezerah and astringency for doraita. The question is, if in this case, since it's elevated, is it astringency or a leniency?
Well, the stringency would be to say the blessing, the leniency would be not to. So you might say, because of doubt, not to make the blessing beforehand, but to make a birchat hamazon, to the benching the grace after meals afterwards. There are some poskim that take that tack and say beforehand don't, afterwards do. But because the majority of poskim in this case go along with the Shulchan Aruch's lead and say that we do make a blessing because you're supposed to sustain your life. So it's not really a case of doubt anymore. Once the majority of poskim say this is the way it is, that would be halacha l'maisa. You know, that would be the way to do it in practical terms. Okay. So Aryeh, go ahead.
So my question was about the blessings of Havdalah, specifically the way Debbie Friedman sings it, where she sings the whole blessing and then she repeats just the last three words. So she doesn't repeat the whole blessing, just the last three words when she sings it. And the question was, is that permitted? And in when some Orthodox people sing it, they sing a version where they do not repeat the last three words. So the question is, what is an interruption, and does this constitute as an interruption? And is it permitted? And I'm going to go off. I have to turn off my camera because my notes are on my phone, and then I'll come back. So in the Gemara in Brachos 40a, it says, continuing to discuss the halachot of breaking bread, Rav said, one who broke bread and before eating it offered a piece to another and said, take it and recite a blessing, take it and recite a blessing, need not recite a blessing a second time, because that is considered to have been for the purpose of blessing. If, however, he said, bring salt or bring relish, he must recite the blessing a second time, as that is considered an interruption between the blessing and eating the bread. And Rabbi Yochanan said, even if he said, bring salt or bring relish, it is not considered an interruption, and he need not recite the blessing a second time. Only if he said, mix the food for the oxen, mix the food for the oxen, it is considered an interruption, and he is required to recite the blessing a second time. And Rav Sheshet said, even if he said, mix for the oxen, he need not recite the blessing a second time, as that is also considered to be for the purpose of the blessing. Now, Rambam, in the first chapter of Hilchos Brachos, writes, whenever one recites a blessing, one should not make an interruption between the blessing and the subject for which the blessing is recited. If one makes an interruption with other matters, one must recite the blessing again. If, however, one makes an interruption which relates to the subject of the blessing, one does not have to repeat the blessing. What is implied? When a person recites a blessing over bread and before eating says, bring salt, bring food, give so-and-so to eat, bring food for the animal, or the like, he need not repeat the blessing. So on the one hand, it would seem that if interruptions related to meal preparation are considered to be the same subject as the blessing, if you're making a blessing over the meal, then simply repeating the last three words of the bracha should certainly be permitted. But a more stringent reading of these statements would be that they seem to imply that initially one should not make an interruption between saying the blessing and benefiting from the subject of the blessing. However, after the fact, if an interruption was made out of necessity or by accident and is related to the subject of the blessing, one does not have to repeat the blessing. Another argument would be whether the repeating the last three words even counts as an interruption. It would seem obvious that something such as speaking about the subject of the bracha would be considered an interruption, but what about repeating the last three words? Is it an interruption, or is it a continuation on the blessing itself? If this was a case of repeating the entire blessing again, it would be obviously prohibited in a case of taking God's name in vain. If this was a case of singing the song outside of the ritual of Havdalah, simply to sing the song and substituting the names of God in the bracha, then certainly repeating the last three words would be permitted, as this would not be a true bracha at all. But here we have a case of doubt. And since brachot are rabbinical and not biblical, we rule leniently in cases of doubt. Therefore, my conclusion is that the repetition of the last three words is not an interruption, but a continuation on the subject of the blessing, and therefore is permitted.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna. That's really good. And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's what the poskim, the discussion among all the authorities revolves around that question: is it a hafsek? A hafsek, by the way, is one of the concepts which is on the concept sheet. The idea of a hafsek, if you're saying if you're doing a mitzvah, particularly a bracha or a prayer, and you repeat words, or well, if you were to stop and take a break and do something else, then it would break up the prayer and you'd have to say it again because you didn't do the whole thing. The question is, if you repeat words, is that considered a hafsek? Is that considered an interruption? That's one of the concepts I want people to learn. And that is, and most of the halachic decisors agree with exactly what you said, which was that because it's part of the same idea. You're saying the same. You're saying the idea of the blessing. Therefore, it's not really a hafsek. It's not really an interruption. Although a lot of rabbis had a lot of harsh words to say regarding people that repeat things, because they said you're messing around with the language. It's not respect for the language, and a lot of other things. So, but there was apparently in Europe, it was very popular, and it's still popular in places for the cantor to sing and repeat words. So there was a lot of rabbis that wrote, "Oh, that's not a good idea," and some of them said, "Well, but the end of the story, you're yotze. You don't. He doesn't have to repeat it, and please don't walk out of shul. I've seen that in several places just because the cantor repeats a word. He wants to do it for artistic reasons, leave him alone, but they didn't like it. So it was kind of a debate back in Europe. So
Shaul, question on that.
go ahead.
Because obviously, yeah, I've seen that before. What's the but what's the difference if you do it in the middle? Like, so if you go ahead, if you're a cantor or whatever, and you repeat the end of a blessing or you repeat the end of something, what if you do it in the middle of it?
Yeah, so some differentiate, first of all, between saying the name of God again or where you say it. So if it's in the middle of a blessing and you haven't yet completed the blessing, then if it was a hefsek, if it was considered an interruption, then you didn't do the whole blessing. But in the case of Debbie Friedman, she says the blessing. The example that I gave, I sent her a link of her video. She says Borei Pri Hagafen, and then says again Borei Pri Hagafen. So the first time around, she did the blessing. The second time around, it might be an interruption in the series of blessings for Havdalah, but there's if that doesn't carry as much weight because the blessing itself was done. So in her case, I mean, most of Moshe Feinstein writes the whole tshuva on this and does it in detail. I can give the reference later, but he basically says it's not a good idea. Don't do it. But the bottom line, it's fine. I mean, there's no halachic, and so any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. Just because she sings it as a song, there is no wine present. She is not actually drinking a wine. Not the wine is nowhere inside. Just a song.
Right.
So does this make a difference?
Well, yeah, for entertainment, there's no issue with saying words as many times as you want. But my question was more focused on if you sang this song for actual Havdalah and you sang it in her style. So, but as a song, there's another issue with saying God's name or saying a blessing as part of a song. That would be a different question. Is that considered a blessing for naught or not? But that might be a question I can ask if someone wants to deal with, because that's another debate on it. We can talk about. If there's anything else, tell me. Otherwise, I have limited time to cover the rest of the subject, and we got a lot to cover today.
I have a question.
Okay.
So I'm confused on something that was said a while ago, because there have been a lot of questions since then. But at one point I thought I heard someone say. So my question is: do we only have to bless food? My question is: do we not have to bless food that's not kosher? Because I thought someone said something like that.
Yeah. Well, the upshot out of what he said was that we don't make a blessing on food that's not kosher unless you're in a situation where you have to eat it because for a matter of life and death. Then you do make a blessing. That was the end story of what we said.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So today we're going to start talking about benching. That's grace after meals, or Birchat Hamazon. You can follow along in my notes, but the first issue with Birchat Hamazon is that it is of Torah origin. The verse says in Devarim 8:10, it says "Ve'achalta," and you shall eat, "Ve'savata," and you will be satisfied, "Uve'rachta," and you need to bless et Hashem Elokecha, the Lord your God. So this is the source, the origin where the pasuk says that we have to thank God after we eat, because the eating comes first, then we're satisfied, and then we bless God. So that means that if we ever have a doubt with benching, you will have to say benching again, or if you're doubtful whether you said it or not. So any case of doubt that comes up regarding benching is a case of sveka deoraita. It's a doubt in a matter of Torah origin, not rabbinic origin. So we always solve the question l'chomra on the more stringent side. So there's a couple things. There's, as we know, there's several blessings in the benching. There's actually 4 blessings, and I'm just going to go through quickly where they are and what they come from. The verse continues, "Uveirachta et Hashem Elokecha," and you shall bless the Lord your God. So that is the source of the first blessing. And the basic idea behind the first blessing is, if you look at the text, Hazan et olam kulo b'tuvo, God is the one who feeds the entire world through his goodness, b'chein, with grace, v'chesed, and kindness, v'rachma, and mercy, and so on. Baruch atah Hashem, I'm skipping the most of it. Blessed are you, God. Hazan et hakol, you who give sustenance to all. That is our way of saying, of thanking God, of the words of Verachta et Hashem. Okay. The next one is the verse continues, Al haaretz, is the blessing because the Torah says Al haaretz, we thank God for the land. That is the origin of the second blessing, which begins Nodeh lecha Hashem Elokeinu al shehenchalta l'avotenu, that you granted to our forefathers Eretz Chemda, a beloved land, Tova Uruchava, which is good and wide, and so on. That's the then it continues until the end. Baruch atah Hashem al haaretz, on the land, the al hamazon, and the food that comes from it. So the third blessing is a blessing over Yerushalayim, of Jerusalem. So and that one because it says al haaretz hatova, on the good land, and the rabbis had a tradition that the good, or the best part of the land is Jerusalem, which therefore the next blessing is on Jerusalem. Now, if you were to say, and we're going to get to this soon, in theory, before the rabbis set it in words, you could have just said these three ideas and you would have fulfilled the Torah's obligation. But as history went on, the rabbis added more and more things, especially the language of Rachemna, God, have mercy upon your people and Jerusalem, and so on. Clearly, that was written after the destruction of the temple, because it's asking God to bonei berachmav, to build Jerusalem, and it says please build Jerusalem. So that was obviously written after the destruction of Jerusalem. A couple other ideas that the Torah mentions is the concept of Brit, the concept of a covenant, which is represented by circumcision. So that's why that's mentioned in benching as well. So the first three blessings are a series of blessings, which is, whenever there's a series, we say, we add the word amen to our own blessing, which is why we say Bonei berachmav Yerushalayim amen, or Bonei Yerushalayim amen in some versions. The fourth blessing was added on even later. So those first three blessings, as I said, all come straight from the verse. The fourth one was added during the time of the Bar Kokhba rebellion, which was a rebellion which happened about, I don't know, maybe about 100 years or so, maybe a little less, from the time of the destruction of the temple. And the Jews rebelled against the Romans, and the Romans brutally crushed the rebellion. And Bar Kokhba had taken up his final stand was in the city of Beitar, which I'm not sure if it's the same place as the modern city of Beitar. It might be around the same area. And thousands of Jews were slaughtered when the Romans put down the rebellion. And when the people were able to come a significant amount of time later to bury the bodies of the people that were killed by the Romans, the bodies had not rotted. They were still fresh, and they were able to bury them. So the rabbis were saying, they made this blessing of Hatov Ha'ametiv, that there's even good, even in bad times, that we thank God for the small favors, the things that he does for us, even in bad times. And that's the origin of the fourth blessing. So the fourth blessing, would be a derabanan, and therefore one might not say it in a case of doubt. But the first three are from the pasuk, are from the verses. I'm going to skip a little bit of talking about the text of the lessons without reading through them, just in the interest of time. There's a couple other additions that we find in the Talmud. One is to bless the host. When the person, if you're a guest at someone's house, blessing the host is mentioned in the Talmud. There's a long version, and then there's a short version. The short version we find in many Ashkenazic Birchons. When in most of the Ashkenazi versions, it's a short version, which is basically will send us great blessing in this house and at this table. And then we say, may God bless the owner of this home and masculine and feminine. But there is a longer version, which I won't go through now, which the Gemara mentions, and some benchers have the longer version. So one of those is also a Talmudic requirement. And then there's a lot of other verses at the end, which are really just customs, and there's different customs throughout the Jewish people, and whatever your custom is to say, whatever your custom is not to say, don't say. The rest of it is all nice verses. Again, we're going to talk, just to mention real quickly, the benching is the same issue. It has to be said out loud, and we will with the same argument we had over Hirur Kedibur Dummy, which is one of the concepts I put down there, whether thinking is like speech. It would be dependent on the same argument. The Rambam would say that it's considered speech, but most of the poskim disagree and say that it's not considered speech. If there was a doubt in this case, you definitely would say Birchat Hamazon again, because the decision was basically against the Rambam on that issue by the majority of authorities. You can say Birchat Hamazon in any language. There is a shortened version if you're in a rush or a hurry that the Panini Halacha actually quotes, but it's a very shortened version of all the blessings. I'm not going to read it now, but it's basically just a couple of quick sentences. And he gets it from the Magen Avraham, who is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, and he gives a short version which says all of the concepts. So there's all the concepts in a shorter version, which fulfills the Torah requirements. So if you're like really in a hurry and you don't have time to say the whole thing, if you can get a copy of the Magen Avraham real fast, or if you just say the concepts in English, the three concepts that we said, then you'd have at least fulfilled your Torah requirement. Now, there is a debate. Let's say you don't know benching by heart. You don't know it by heart, and you don't have access to nowadays a cell phone. You can pull up your Birchat Hamazon, but you don't have that. You don't have Siddur. You don't have any way of saying it. But you do know Al Hamichya. You do know the blessing we say after eating mizonot. We're going to get to the laws of Al Hamichya later. The question is, if you say Al Hamichya, if that counts for benching or not. It's a big argument among the poskim. So if you did say Al Hamichya after a meal and you said, oh my gosh, I thought I just had cake, but actually I just had bread, now I have to bench. So here's a case of Sveika D'Oraita L'Chumra, right? So do you have to bench again? So some say that most of the ideas are in Al Hamichya, so it's not really a suffix, it's not really a doubt. And some say that it doesn't really say all three ideas. So that's just a big debate. I'm touching upon it. I'm not going into it, but I'm mentioning it so that you're aware of that difficulty. But most poskim today would say that if you're truly in such a situation and you know Al Hamichya by heart, then go ahead and say it. It's hard to imagine nowadays because we all have our cell phones. You can pull out a benching pretty easily. The next question is when you do a short version, right? There's a famous argument between the Rambam and the Tosfot, which is over whether or not there's a requirement to say three separate blessings to express those three ideas, or is it just a requirement to say the three ideas, but you can say it in one blessing? So if you're doing the short version, that would be an argument between the two of them. All right, now I want to get to something that might be a little more interesting. How much do you have to eat in order to be obligated in benching? So here is where you have a couple of concepts that you need to understand. So the Torah said, "V'achalta v'savak," if you eat and you are satisfied. So think about that for a minute. So if you eat and you're full and your belly is full, regardless even if it's a small amount, if you now feel like, okay, now I feel better, I'm full, then, or at least satisfied, then that's enough to require benching. But let's say you eat and you're not satisfied. So then from the Torah requirement, you would not be obligated in benching. So just give me 1 second here. However, the rabbis from the rabbinic decree, they stated that if you eat a kizayit, an amount the size of an olive, you're obligated to bench whether you're satisfied or not. So here's where it gets the rule of rabbinic versus Torah origin gets into play. So if you're not sure how much you ate and you are satisfied, then it's a doubt in a matter of a Torah origin, and you're supposed to make the blessing. If you're not satisfied, and I hope I'm making sense here, if you're not satisfied and you're not sure if you ate a kizayit or not, right? If you're not sure you ate an olive size, then it's a doubt in a rabbinic matter. Does that make sense? So the Chachamim said that if you eat a kizayit, you have to bench. The Torah said only if you're satisfied, you have to bench. So if you're not sure, if you're full, then you should bench. If you're not, because it's a doubt in a Torah issue. But if you are not full and you're not sure if you ate a kizayit or not, then it's a doubt in a rabbinic issue and you would not bench. I hope that makes sense. So now the question, what if you're sitting around and it's you're having a nice time with friends, and then an hour later after you don't remember if you benched or not. So again, it's the case of a doubt. It's a doubt in a matter of Torah origin. Now the satisfaction of the Torah doesn't have to be from bread. So if you eat a little piece of bread, but you're satisfied by everything else you ate in the meal, then that's also considered satisfied, and it's a Torah obligation to bench. There is arguments among the poskim whether or not women are obligated from B'nai Torah in benching. The general decision is on the side that they're obligated just like men. It has to do with, I don't have time to go through the Gemara and Brachot there, but the general approach is that they are obligated in Torah. The question is, in which case, even in the case of doubt, they would have to bench. But the Rambam says that I'm sorry. So some say that it's a derabana, and some say that in other words, it's rabbinic origin. Some say there's a lot of debates on that. I wish I had more time to talk about the origin of that debate, but I'm going to try to cover some other topics. Maybe I'll get back to that next time to give you the full rundown on that one. Now, there is the idea.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
What does bench mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. Bench is the Yiddish word for birchat hamazon, or grace after meals. So I use the word bench. It's shorter. It's the shortest of all three of those options: the English option or the Hebrew option.
So it means saying grace.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. It literally means to bless. It's the Yiddish word for bless, but it's generally used in reference to the blessing after eating.
It's actually the Latin for
so that
Benedict.
So that means that if you're not satisfied, then you don't have to say a blessing.
If you're not satisfied, then the Torah does not obligate you to say a blessing.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So there's a bunch of additions, and I'm going to say a couple of rules. Any day that the Torah said, any special day of the year, Pesach, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, any special day of the year where we say Musaf, prayer. The reason why we say Musaf prayer is because a special sacrifice was added for that day in the time of the temple. So we add a prayer to our davening called Musaf. Is a day also that we add an extra part to the Ya'aleh V'yavo prayer to our bench. Now, so and on Shabbat we also say something special. These are of rabbinic origin. We say the special prayer of Ritzei, and of course, if you remember the later rabbinic holidays of Purim and Hanukkah, there's Al Hanisim. Now the issue is as follows: any day on where, let me say a couple of things first. Let's say you started a meal on Tuesday afternoon, in the evening, but it's still daytime. And when Wednesday is Rosh Chodesh. So the sun sets and now it's Rosh Chodesh. So you're going to bench, right? So half the meal was eaten before it was Rosh Chodesh, half the meal was eaten afterwards. So the general rule is that as long as part of the meal was eaten on the special day, you're supposed to say the special edition for that day. So if you started on Rosh Chodesh and you ended after Rosh Chodesh, or you started before Rosh Chodesh and you ended on Rosh Chodesh, you do say Ya'aleh V'yavo. The same thing goes for Shabbat. So if you would start a meal on Shabbos afternoon and you complete it after the sun goes down, you still say Ritzeh, right? You still say this, but if you're eating Shalosh Sudot in Shul and you go past the end of Shabbat, you still say Ritzeh. There's a whole debate, but what if you're eating the third meal, Shalosh Sudot, on Shabbos afternoon, and Sunday is Rosh Chodesh. So Shabbat ends, Rosh Chodesh starts, but you're still eating the meal. So for you, it's still Shabbat until you end Shabbat. So there's a lot of opinions, right? One opinion is that because you were celebrating Shabbat, it's as if Rosh Chodesh didn't start. Others say that no, Shabbat is over. So all you say is for Rosh Chodesh. Others say you say both. And some say if Rosh Chodesh is coming after Shabbos, be careful to finish your meal before Shabbos is over so you don't have these questions. But so there's just about every possible opinion you can find among the poskim. The most accepted one that I've seen is to say the Shabbat only. But any way you go, you have support for it. You can decide which way you want to go. Now, then
when is Rosh Chodesh?
Rosh Chodesh is the first day of every month, the new moon.
That's what I thought. And
Right.
don't some people fast on Rosh Chodesh?
There are customs surrounding Rosh Chodesh, not so much to fast on the day. Some people the day before, there's different customs like that.
Oh,
But there's no such requirement.
okay. But
Okay.
it's okay.
Okay. So now any one of the additions, let's take Ya'aleh V'yavo for example. If you forget Ya'aleh V'yavo, do you have to say benching again? So that depends, and this is what it depends on. It depends whether or not there's an obligation to eat a meal in honor of the particular chag that we're discussing. So, for example, Pesach night. Everyone agrees that there's an obligation to have a seder on Pesach night, the first night. So there, the Ya'aleh V'yavo that you say in benching, the extra prayer we say for Pesach and benching is required because the meal's required and you're required to say special Ya'aleh V'yavo in benching. On Chol HaMoed Pesach, right, during the intermediate days of the holiday, you were also supposed to say Ya'aleh V'yavo, but there's no obligation to have a special meal on Chol HaMoed. So everyone agrees that if you forget Ya'aleh V'yavo on Chol HaMoed, and during the intermediate days, then you don't repeat benching if you forget Ya'aleh V'yavo. The same thing were to go for Rosh Chodesh, because on the first day of the month, we do say Ya'aleh V'yavo, but there's no special mitzvah of having a meal on Rosh Chodesh. So therefore, if you forget Ya'aleh V'yavo, you don't need to bench. You don't need to repeat the benching. There is a debate as to whether or not, on Shabbat, is a requirement for 3 meals, right? But what about on the Chag, on the daytime of Pesach or the daytime of Sukkot, right? So that's a large debate. Some say, while it is a mitzvah to have a meal, there is no, it is a nice thing and a good thing and everything, but it's not an absolute requirement, and therefore you would not repeat. And some say that you have to have 2 meals at night and in the day, and therefore you do repeat it. That's a machloket. So in the case where if you did forget Ya'aleh V'yavo during the day, many poskim say not to repeat it because here you have a doubt in a rabbinic matter. Because even though the benching itself is a Torah origin, the addition of Ya'aleh V'yavo is a rabbinic origin. Now here's another interesting question. What if you don't remember if you said Yalav Yavo or not. So some say that, well, that's a case of a doubt. In a doubt in rabbinic matter, you don't repeat. We go leniently and we don't repeat it. Others will say no, because you're accustomed to saying during the week benching without saying the extras. We assume that you didn't say the extra also, and they don't consider that a doubt. That's a different concept called a chazaka. A chazaka means that we make an assumption that you did what you usually do. And when you usually say the Birchat Hamazon, when you usually bench during the week, you usually don't say those additions. Therefore, you can assume that you didn't, and you do repeat the blessing. And that's a machloket, that's an argument among the poskim. But I'm going to add that idea of a chazaka, which is basically means the assumption that you do what you usually do. I want to skip, because we mentioned the mayim achronim, the water at the end of the meal. So I'm going to I want to get to there. So many people might have seen that, or you might do this yourself, the custom to give out water to wash the hands at the end of the meal. So the Gemara, the rabbis give two reasons for this. One is because they would generally eat with their hands. They didn't eat with a fork and knife. So their hands were dirty and they're full of the food, the residue of the food. So a little bit of water washed it off, and that was done in honor of saying the blessing after the meal. Another reason they had was they used to use salt, and the salt would get on their fingers, and if they would touch their eyes, the salt would get in their eyes and it would be dangerous. So by rinsing it off with a little bit of water, you got rid of the salt. Now, nowadays, in terms of the halacha, it's generally most halachic authorities agree that, number one, we use a fork and a knife, right? And we don't get food in general on our fingers. And therefore, and obviously, if your hands are all dirty, you should wash them. But in general, our hands aren't dirty. And also, the little bit of salt that we might sprinkle on our food, if we touched our eyes, it wouldn't be that big a deal. So the obligation that the Gemara said, that the rabbis said, doesn't apply anymore. However, there are other spiritual reasons that are given in the more Kabbalistic works, which talk about a spirit that's on the fingers, and you need to wash them off before you bench. What someone asked, it may have been last week, it may have been another one of the previous weeks, about why, when they went, I think they had mentioned where they saw in Chabad, but it could have been somewhere else, where they only gave it to the men to wash their hands. I don't fully understand the Kabbalistic explanations as to why they do Mayim Achronim, but for whatever reason, because it's Kabbalistic and it's not actual requirement, they only give it to men and not women. You'd have to ask a little bit of some people that know more about the mystical origins. If anyone knows, feel free to let me know at the end. There is one story that I would like to end with and mention a custom. I skipped a little bit because just in interest of time, but it's a story of actually my great-grandfather. So I would like to add it if you don't mind. And my great-grandfather was a Hasidic Rebbe, the Rebbe of the Hasidic group called Mudgets. And there is a custom when we bench to leave some scraps of food on the table. The various reasons why, but the main reason given among the poskim, among the authorities, is that if a person sits down and eats everything that's in front of him, it looks greedy. It's just not it's not the right way to do things. You always leave a little bit over. Maybe someone else needs some food, don't just grab everything for yourself. So some of you may or may not be familiar with the custom that some Hasidic groups have, that they would, after they finish their meal at home, they go and join the Rebbe at the Rebbe's tish. They go to at his table, to his Shabbat table, and they say Torah and they sing songs. And the Rebbe gives out a little bit of his food. He gives out, he has extra food. He gives out food to people to eat, and they call it shirayan. They call it leftovers. which is basically saying the same idea, which is leave a little bit over, for other people. The Rebbe eats for himself and leave a little over. So when the Nazis invaded Poland, the day the Nazis invaded Poland was the day before Rosh Hashanah in 1939, and he was living in a town outside Warsaw, and he plus my grandfather and two of his brothers ran from Warsaw, the four of them together, and they spent a couple of weeks running through all the forests of Poland until they finally made it across the border into Lithuania. And when they got to Lithuania, one Shabbat, they stopped in a city called Kovna, which is a city in Lithuania. So here you have a Hasidic rabbi in a very non-Hasidic town, but he showed up for Shabbat. So the people said, they had him, he did his regular Shabbat table and had people come, and people come to watch what happens, and at a Hasidic Rebbe's table. So as he ate from, he was eating a little bit of food, and he gave out to the people that were around, and people were kind of giggling a little bit, at this custom, because it looked odd to them and they had never seen it before. So he said, and this is the quote as I heard it from my grandfather, he said to everyone, I know that to you this custom looks a little bit unusual, but if I can tell you that if Hitler knew the secret of Shirayim, I wouldn't be sitting here today. The secret of this custom. So everyone's looking, what does he mean if Hitler knew the secret of the custom? So he said the secret of this custom is that we're supposed to take what we need for ourselves and leave everything else for other people. That's the point. If Hitler knew and understood that, he would keep Germany for himself, and he wouldn't go around invading other countries and taking other people's things away. So I wouldn't be here. Anyway, I wanted to end with that story and to remind us of that custom to keep a little bit of food, a little bit of crumbs on the table, and benching. There's a few more things that are in my notes that I might have run through, but just in the interest of time, I tried.
Shaul,
Yes, go ahead.
what ended up happening with your family?
Well, actually, they made it to Vilna, where they stayed for several months. Vilnius, which was neutral territory, and they were one of the first people to take the route across Russia to Japan. And they went to Kobe, Japan, and they stayed in Japan for a while as refugees, and eventually made it to the United States. It was interesting. A couple of years back, I was at the Holocaust Museum, and they had an exhibit on the Jewish refugees that made it out through Japan. And they had a picture of a whole bunch of them in Kobe, Japan, and I saw my grandfather in the picture. But he was then.
I've been there. There's a nice Jewish community there.
Yeah.
There is still today in Kobe?
Yeah.
Nice. That's interesting. I didn't realize that.
There's the Japanese diplomat who helped them escape. There's a beautiful movie about him. I've forgotten his name.
Sugihara.
I'm sorry?
Sugihara.
Thank you. It's actually a really beautiful story where he actually went around the direction of the Japanese government to go ahead and stamp the visas to allow the Yidden to escape.
He was fired for that. They fired the Japanese government, fired
and dishonored, which is the ultimate penalty, if you will, within the Japanese culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, looking forward to next week. I'll try to send out a couple other questions. We have so far one person next week, but hopefully the next day or two, I'll send out another question. So we'll have two again. But thank you, everyone.
Shikoyach.
All right. Be well.
Thank you. Well.
Thank you.